had talked about what classification is. Especially, we had talked about what classification of animals is. You have plant classification, you have animal classification, you have microbial classification, you have the classification of the whole living kingdom. But we are now talking about classification in general and more specifically classification of animals. So the basic principle is we take some similar features, see different organisms, take similar features, and they put them in one group. And with these similar features, we put them in another group. একই রকম ক্যারেক্টার গুলো নিয়ে তুমি একটা গ্রুপে রাখলে আর এক বিভিন্ন ভিন্ন ক্যারেক্টার দেখে আলাদা গ্রুপে রাখলে ঠিক আছে this is how this is the essence of classification, and for this you have different science developing like taxonomy, which even evolves into systematics, and further cladistics, phylogenetic classification. We have laws, a lot of you can go into depth of classifying organisms, but the highlight is that same character in one group, different character in different group. Now you can have characters, when you say same character, how many same characters or how many different characters? This is also a part of classification. We then count it. We count the numerical taxonomy. We count the number of similarities. So today we will talk about three systems of classification. One is the artificial classification. প্রথমটাতে দেখো artificial classification, natural classification, and phylogenetic classification. Essentially, there are more in different books you'll find different types of classification, but we restrict ourselves to these three different types of classification or systems of classification, or I like to call it as philosophy of classification. First one is artificial, second one is natural, and the third one is phylogenetic. As per when you call artificial classification, it is somewhat, the name is a misnomer. There is nothing called artificial. What do you mean by artificial? It's something artificial you manufacture. So, but still, since the name is already in the textbooks, we are using this artificial name. Now we will understand what are these different types of classification. Right? You can go to the next one. I have introduced what classification is. Now we'll talk about what artificial classification is, what natural classification is, what phylogenetic classification is, what cladistics is. Then we will compare the different classifications. We will discuss about what is the importance of these classification and what is the future in these classifications, and we will conclude from this. Okay, go to the next one, which is the introduction to classification. So classification in zoology involves grouping organisms based on similarities. We had talked about it. Similar organisms placed in one group, dissimilar organisms placed in another group. And we have talked that there are three main types of classification: artificial, natural, and phylogenetic. So it helps in understanding evolutionary relationships, biodiversities, and organismal characteristics. So what is the importance of classification? It helps in understanding evolutionary relationships. You classify, you can understand what their ancestors were, or how they are related through their ancestors, how different organisms are related through their ancestors. You can understand it. Biodiversity, you can understand why there is so many different types of species present, a diverse type of species. See, in this room itself, I can see four species. One is the human, then you find the deer, tiger, zebra. Any more? Already 4 different species. So basically, what you can say is that this diversity, you can understand why we have kept it, they are diverse. Classification helps. নয়তো কুকুর আর বেড়ালকে একই নাম ধরে ডাকবে, কোনটা কুকুর কোনটা বেড়াল কোনটা ঘোড়া কোনটা হাতি কিচ্ছু বুঝতে পারতেন না। ঠিক আছে, ওকে, go to the next one. Now what is artificial classification? This artificial classification, it is based on observable characteristics. Observable means which you can see, চোখে দেখা যায় যেগুলো, observable characteristics. That is the first point. The second point is it focuses on few attributes such as habitat or body shape. It takes few attributes, few characters, few points. For example, in a very layman's way, you can classify organism as terrestrial, arboreal on the tree, terrestrial on the land, arboreal on the tree, aerial in the air floating, and aquatic underwater. So this type of classification is taking just a very few one characteristic. Where is its habitat? আকাশে ওড়ে, গাছে থাকে, ডাঙায় থাকে না জলে থাকে? Okay, so this it is somewhat superficial, you can call this superficial artificial, that under the by this classification your birds and bees, the পাখি আর মৌমাছি, তাকে তুমি একই গ্রুপে ফেলে দিলে, একটু বোকা বোকা লাগছে, but as per artificial classification that's fine, it is not stupid. Very few, one or two characters, on the basis of this you divide it, and it does not consider evolutionary relationships. কোনো এভলিউশন এর আগে কে ছিল, 2000 বছর আগে কি একই স্পিসিস ছিল, ওদের কি এই ক্যারেক্টার ছিল, কিচ্ছু দেখে না। আর সামনে যা উড়ছে সব, ও উড়ছে তো ওরা হচ্ছে এরিয়াল, ডাঙায় রয়েছে তো তারা হচ্ছে টেরেস্ট্রিয়াল, আর তারা যখন মানে মানে তোমার জলে জলে আছে তো অ্যাকোয়াটিক। Simple classification. Okay, go to the next one. So you look at the artificial classification, the one which I taught, grouping of animals based on habitat, aquatic, terrestrial, and aerial. Okay. So look at the diagram. Habitat of animal, like I said, first it can be terrestrial, it can be aerial, arboreal, gache, aquatic, and one more they have added, amphibian, both land and water. Fine. So terrestrial, cat, dog, cow, camel; aerial, birds and insects. So you see insects and birds and bees are in one place, one group as per artificial classification. Then you have monkey, lizards in arboreal, ওপরে মানে গাছে থাকে কি দেয়ালে থাকে, ওপর দিকে মানে মাটিতে নয়। And aquatic, fish and whales. Whales are mammals and fish are fish. So fish and mammals are they are placed in same group as per aquatic. এখন nowadays you feel it's very strange, but actually classification wise, in artificial classification, in a layman's term, in a simplistic term, it's quite useful. You can classify things on the basis of their habitats. Useful. So whenever you go going underwater, you can expect these things, these animals to be present over there. So you can't expect another human being to be downstairs and underwater, but you can expect fishes, whales, certain aquatic insects, some plant life, algae. You can expect them to be underwater. Then you have the amphibians, জলেও থাকে উভয়চর, জলেও থাকে স্থলেও থাকে. You can go to the next one. Now we come to the natural classification. Now this natural classification is what actually we are currently we are doing natural classification. Last 200 years natural classification. Some people consider phylogenetic classification as into natural classification, but there are certain subtle differences. হালকা হালকা তফাৎ রয়েছে ন্যাচারাল আর ফাইলোজেনেটিকের মধ্যে। কেন ফাইলোজেনেটিক ক্লাসিফিকেশনকে আমরা ন্যাচারাল ক্লাসিফিকেশন বলবো না? হালকা হালকা জিনিস তফাৎ আছে, কিন্তু বেসিক্যালি phylogenetic classification is basically dealing with evolutionary relationships. It's not dealing with characters directly. Characters deals with characters, but not directly. Natural character. What does natural classification do? It takes into account multiple characteristics and overall similarities. So, what are multiple characteristics? It takes into account morphology. तुम्हारा थोबड़ा देख के पता चलता है कि ये कुत्ता है या बिल्ली है। वन कैरेक्टर, सिर्फ थोबड़ा देख के नहीं बोलता है। ओके, दे कैन टेक इनटू मेनी थिंग्स। पहले थोबड़ा देखेगा, फिर तुमको काट के अंदर में देखेगा क्या क्या है। दैट इज एनाटॉमी। सो यू यूज मॉर्फोलॉजी, एनाटॉमी, फिजियोलॉजी। तुम्हारे अंदर कैसे चल रहे हैं, हार्ट वार्ट चल रहे हैं, कैसे चल रहे हैं, फिजियोलॉजी। The biochemistry, then they will look into the molecular biology, the genetics, then okay, they stitch them up, they will look at them at the natural habitat, what they are doing, বাইরে কি করছে, লাফাচ্ছে না বসে রয়েছে, at what time of the year they are active, at what time of the year they are passive, because there are animals more or less similar, they look similar, but one of them is active in September, one is active in November, so they don't mate with each other. So you can consider them to be separate species, but they look same, and you can make them breed also among themselves. It's possible. For example, Rana americana and Rana pipiens. One is in September. They peak in September. The numbers go up in September, and a bit more in November. Rana americana goes up, and result is that they don't have a very overlap region among themselves. So when they don't have an overlap region, they can't mate with themselves. So gradually, as time goes on, they become different species as per laws of evolution. But if you want, you can make them mate. Although that's not the best, you can get hybrids also. But একজন দিনের বেলা প্রেম করছে, একজন রাতের বেলা প্রেম করছে। এবারে দুজনের মধ্যে তো প্রেম করানো যাবে না, কেন রাত্রির বেলায় ঘুমোচ্ছে, দিনের বেলায় ঘুমোচ্ছে, করবেটা কি করে? So you cannot make them mate. But of course, someday somebody wakes up at the person who sleeps in the morning wakes up in the morning, and somebody who wakes up in the night suddenly sleeps in the night, and result they can meet and possibly they can mate. But the chances of this incident happening is very low. Okay, একটা দুটো সেপ্টেম্বরের ব্যাংক পড়ে রইলো, হ্যাঁ, নভেম্বরে দু চারটে পাকা ব্যাংক বেরিয়ে গেল, খুব তাড়াতাড়ি ম্যাচিওর করে গেল, ব্যাস মিটিং হয়ে গেল। This can happen. So they take into for this classification they take into take into account several characters: morphological, anatomical, behavioral, physiological, biochemical, molecular biology, everything they take. Even they consider some evolutionary trait also. Now when we take into account evolutionary trait also, you will say that this, why is it not a phylogenetic classification? Of course, some books you will find only two systems of classification: one is natural and one is artificial. Some books they consider phylogenetic classification as a natural classification, but as per your syllabus we have to study it as separate. Okay, and so as you know that this represents a more scientific way of grouping organisms, take into account many characteristics. যেরকম তোমাকে আর তোমাকে তোমার দেখতে এক নয়, কিন্তু আমরা জানি দুজনে হিউম্যান, they belong to the same species. কেন শুধু মুখ দেখে you are not classifying them into different species. মুখটা দেখতে আলাদা, হ্যাঁ, এর ফিমেল ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স আছে, ওর মেল ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স আছে, হ্যাঁ, মুখ আলাদা, তার মানে কি ও আলাদা স্পিসিস? নো, আদার ক্যারেক্টারিস্টিক্স দেখে তো তোমার ভেতরে মরফোলজিক্যাল, অ্যানাটমিক্যাল, বিহেভিয়ারাল, ফিজিওলজিক্যাল, মানে অল দিস ক্যারেক্টার্স টেকেন টুগেদার, ওকে, এরা দুজনে সেম স্পিসিস। দেখতে আলাদা বলে কিন্তু আমরা আলাদা করে দিলাম না, শুধু মরফোলজি দেখে আলাদা করে দিলাম না। সো দিস ইজ দ্য মোর সায়েন্টিফিক ওয়ে। অ্যাজ পার আর্টিফিশিয়াল ক্লাসিফিকেশন এদেরকে আলাদা করে দেওয়া যেতে পারতো, না, করা হয়নি। আর্টিফিশিয়ালটা একটু সুপারফিশিয়াল। ঠিক আছে, নেক্সটটাতে যান। সো We are talking about an example of natural classification. Classification animals based on internal and external anatomy. So first you can break it without backbone, মেরুদণ্ড নেই, invertebrates, and the one with vertebrates. Vertebrates can be you can classify them into birds, mammals, warm-blooded, cold-blooded. Birds and mammals, they are warm-blooded. Fish, reptiles, amphibians, cold-blooded. So it's a classification. Invertebrate without backbone, you can break them up into porifera, that is sponges, sponge, Nidaria, jellyfish, Annelida কেঁচো, earthworms, mollusca, শামুক, echinodermata, starfish. We have platyhelminthes. You name one. Can anybody of you name one famous platyhelminthes? Tapeworm. You have the insects or the arthropods. In the arthropods, you have crustaceans, arachnida, মাকড়সা, crustacean, চিংড়ি মাছ, insects, আরশোলা, myriapoda, কেন্ন, জুলুস, myriapoda. You find many legs, centipedes, অনেকগুলো পা রয়েছে। এরকম করে কেঁচোর মতন ঘুরে বেড়ায়, অনেক ছোট ছোট পা আছে, ওটা কেঁচো নয় কিন্তু। বর্ষাকালে দেখবে এরকম কালো গোল্ডেন ঘুরে বেড়াচ্ছে, দেয়ালের মধ্যে চলে আসে। So you can, this is based on the anatomy, you can and different other characteristics that you can classify. So let's go to the next one. So let us compare artificial versus natural classification. Artificial classification based on a few traits and natural is based on many traits. অনেকগুলো জিনিস দেখে তোমরা করছো। Artificial superficial characters, মানে উপরে উপরে, জলে আছে কি ডাঙায় আছে এটা উপরে উপরে দেখছো, জলে আছে তো আছে কিন্তু কি আছে you are not seeing, you are not looking at that. And natural classification, they look at evolutionary trait. You and monkeys have something in common. Difference, you don't have tail, but you don't need a tail to be monkeys. I think sometimes মাদ্রামি করার জন্য লেজের দরকার হয় না, ঠিক আছে? তো যাই হোক, whatever be the case, you look at evolutionary, you and monkeys have some characteristics. Both of you have developed erect posture, enlarged cranium. So monkeys and you must have had a common ancestor. Yes, some common ancestor, not the primates. You had some common ancestors. Ancestors to our primates. So you are looking at differences also, similarities also. You put them, monkeys and ourselves are as primates. We have classified ourselves as primates. We now, only the humans have done. Monkeys are least bothered in classification. They are more interested in the banana which you give them rather than the classification scheme. So artificial is not scientific. Natural classification is more scientific. Artificial classification does not consider genetics. We consider that the natural classification, it considers genetics. Genes, sequence of genes, we consider them. Chimps and ourselves, we have, I was reading that we have something like a 70 to 60% similarity. That's pretty high. Genetic similarities. অনেক জায়গায় 80% আছে. Okay, let's go to the next one. So now what is phylogenetic classification and how is it different? It is based on evolutionary history and ancestry. So in natural classification, although we are using evolutionary traits, essentially our ancestor, it was actually some other vertebrates. Before that, it was a single cell. So as per this evolutionary classification, if from one cell to two cells to multicellular organisms to plants, animals, and the animals, it all started to evolve into different types of animals. One line is considered as one evolutionary species. One line, one evolutionary species. Okay. তার মানে x থেকে y, y থেকে z, z থেকে a, a থেকে b. So x, y, z, a, b, c. This is one species. Now from a, it can bifurcate and become f. F is a different species. Okay. We will talk about that much later, about the construction of phylogenetic trees and what is cladistics. We will discuss more in the next class. We'll talk about what cladistics is in details, but this just, it's based on evolutionary history and your ancestry. So তোমার যারা তোমার যারা মানে অ্যানসেস্টর ছিল, ওদেরকেও তোমরা একই গ্রুপে ফেলছো, এভলিউশনারি গ্রুপ। তোমার পূর্বপুরুষরা একই एवोल्यूशनरी ग्रुप में पढ़ছে, तुम्हारे पूर्वज एक ही एवोल्यूशनरी ग्रुप में है। दैट कुड बी समथिंग लाइक अ मंकी। ठीक है, दैट इज एवोल्यूशनरी क्लासिफिकेशन। बट ন্যাচারাল ক্লাসিফিকেশন এর থেকে তফাৎ হচ্ছে, উই আর কনসিডারিং আদার ট্রেটস অলসো অ্যাজ ওয়েল। এখানে এভলিউশনারি অ্যানসেস্ট্রিটা দেখছি, সেটা অবভিয়াসলি ক্যারেক্টার্স দেখে দেখছি, মানে জিনিসটা তুমি কানটাকে এইভাবে ধরা আর আরেকটা হচ্ছে কানটাকে এইভাবে ধরা, তফাৎ আছে, কানই ধরছো কিন্তু তফাৎ আছে। So what it does, it uses cladograms and phylogenetic trees, and its classification, it aims to represent true evolutionary relationship. How is you related to monkey? We are trying to find by making a tree. In the next picture, go to the next one. This is a tree. What you see over here is a phylogenetic tree. ঠিক আছে? Look at number 3 on the top. There was an ancestor over here that got bifurcated into chordates and it got bifurcated into echinoderms. Okay, clear? So they had a common ancestor, chordates and echinoderms. It is known that it has got a common ancestor. So it's like a tree with different branches. So from 2 branches come out. One branch is for chordates, one branch is for echinodermata. Towards the left, absolute left of the figure, there is a line, only a single line, horizontal line. ওটাকে root বলা হয়। Okay, শেকড়। From that, lot of branches are coming out from the tree. Then one is going from one, consider one line which is going to chordates and echinoderms, and one line which is going to arthropods and the others, all the other species. So then again you go to 2. From 2 you see that there are 2 branches coming out. One is going to arthropods and nematodes, and the other is going to annelids and mollusks. And one is going to platyhelminthes. Later it was found that platyhelminthes also belongs to a advanced stage, but we will talk about that later. So this is a phylogenetic tree. By looking at this, you have a clear idea of what the evolutionary history is. এই যে 1টা কে ছিল, 2টা কে ছিল, তুমি জানলে যে chordate আর echinoderm এর একটা common ancestor ছিল, number 3. We don't know what it said. It was a hypothetical number 3. We are considering it. Arthropod and nematodes, they had a common ancestor. We don't know the name. Maybe we didn't find the fossil. We hypothetically it is number 4. From ওই hypothetical ancestor থেকে you had arthropods and nematodes coming. So this is a phylogenetic classification. Okay, let's go to the next one. Cladistics. We will talk about cladistics in the next day with much more details about cladistics. So cladistics, it is a method of classification based on common ancestry. So একটা ওই 4 থেকে you are seeing chordates and on one side you are echinoderms. So both have a common ancestry. So what you are, this type of a study is known as cladistics. You make a branches, and this is a phylogenetic tree. You make phylogenetic trees. Clear? So and one line, number 3 take a chordates, that is one clear. Where number 3 এর আগে number 2 ছিল, So number 2, number 3, chordates. It is one clade. Number 2, number 3, echinoderm. That is another clade. ঠিক আছে, সেম ক্লেডের নয় কিন্তু। As per evolutionary species, কখনো কখনো number 2 and number 3, they can belong to different evolutionary species. মানে একটা ক্লেড যাচ্ছে তো, we don't talk about species, we talk about clade in evolutionary classification. একটা হচ্ছে 2, 3 chordates, 2, 3 echinoderms. Clear? So this is useful in tracing evolutionary path. So examples I've given you: mammalians, they had a therapsid common ancestors. Examples are human, dogs, whales. You have apes, they have theropod dinosaurs. এরা হচ্ছে এদের ancestors ছিল theropod dinosaurs. হ্যাঁ, XYZ একটা theropod dinosaurs, এই গ্রুপগুলো বলা হয়েছিল। যে eagle, penguins, sparrows, reptilia, early amniotes যাদের ডিম পারত, snakes, turtles, lizards. These are different clades. যেরকম 2, 3 chordates, 2, 3 echinoderms. There are two different clades. এরা হচ্ছে different clades. Mammal, therapsid ancestor mammal, one clade. Apes, theropod dinosaurs, one clade. It's like this. Let's go to the next one. So here you are seeing an so this evolutionary relationship. So phylogenetic classification, it provides a more accurate understanding of evolutionary relationship. Okay, it provides a more accurate understanding of evolutionary relationship. কে কিভাবে related, you get to know this much better when you do it. And you have DNA and molecular studies also. You say, see, check the DNA sequence. One nucleotide mismatch, one DNA nucleotide mismatch between two species. That is known. That is the difference in one character. Similarity, dissimilarity. That is one character. Okay. Now I have drawn another phylogenetic tree. First character, vertebra. Vertebra আছে, invertebrates এর আলাদা, vertebrate line. Now we are talking about vertebrate line. Now second is bony skeleton. উপরে দেখো, from ray fin fish, amphibians, primates, rodents, crocodiles, dinosaurs and birds, they all have bony skeleton. Kintu sharks, they don't have bony skeleton, so it is an outlier. আলাদা চলে গেল. You draw a separate line for that. দেখো, sharks টা আলাদা হয়ে গেল. Then four limbs: bony fishes, amphibians, primates, rodents, rabbits, crocodiles, dinosaurs and birds. They have four limbs. So their group becomes separate, and fish become, bony fish becomes separate. রুই মাছ আলাদা হয়ে গেল আর তোমরা আলাদা হয়ে গেল. Then amniotic egg, ডিম পারে কিনা? amniotic egg, amphibians দের amniotic egg হয় না, হ্যাঁ, কিন্তু যাদের amniotic egg হয়, primates, rodents, crocodiles, dinosaurs, birds, যাদের ডিম দিয়ে অমলেট করা যায়, হ্যাঁ, amnion, allantois, there are 4 layers of an egg যেগুলো রয়েছে, এরা আলাদা হয়ে গেল. সিমিলারলি হেয়ার আছে, rodents and primates, এদের তুমি আলাদা করে দিলে. আবার হেয়ার নেই, টু পোস্ট অরবিটাল ফেনিস্ট্রে, এখানে দুটো ফুটো থাকে এই জায়গায়, এটা একটা থাকে তোমার, ওদের দুটো থাকে লিজার্ডসদের হাড়েতে, মাথায়. So this is how actually you construct a phylogenetic tree. We will talk in another class in details about construction of phylogenetic trees. But এটা দেখে তো বুঝতে পারছো কিভাবে ভাগ করা হচ্ছে ক্লাসিফিকেশনটা? খুব সিম্পল, but it is I find lots of students making mistakes over here. Taxonomy is considered, as I see from the students' point of view, it is the most difficult topic to study, taxonomy. কি আছে, because there is not a single book which writes it properly. There are books, মান্দাতা আমলে বিশাল বিশাল বই আছে, 5 নম্বরের জন্য তোমাকে এত মোটা মোটা 10টা ভলিউম পড়তে হবে বোঝার জন্য. It's not possible in this semester framework, NEP framework of time. So let us compare classification: artificial, observable traits, habitat-based grouping, natural, anatomical similarities and other similarities. anatomical plus other similarities. ঠিক আছে? Mammals, reptiles দেখেছো, phylogenetic evolutionary history, clades like mammalia, clades like apes, clades like fishes. Clade মানে বুঝে গেছে তো, ওই লাইন 2 3 coded 2 3 equinoderm, যেটা বলেছিলাম clade. So importance in classification, এটা 1 নম্বরে আসতে পারে. Helps in understanding biological diversity, like I told. It provides insights into evolutionary history, and that is important for conservation efforts. তুমি এই গ্রুপের অর্গানিজম, তো এই গ্রুপের অর্গানিজম গুলোকে এই জিনিস দিলে এরা ভালো থাকতে পারে, তুমি ওদের বাঁচিয়ে রাখতে চাও, তাদেরকে এই জিনিস দিতে হবে, এই খাবার দিতে হবে, তাহলে এরা বেঁচে থাকবে, তাই জন্য কনজার্ভ করতে পারো, ইটস ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট. আচ্ছা, অ্যাপ্লিকেশন. Classification helps in organizing biological data. It is important for ecological research and environmental study, and it is useful in predicting behavior and traits of organisms. হ্যাঁ, মানুষকে শাসন না করলেই বাঁদর হয়ে যাবে, যদি সোসাইটি শাসন না করে মানুষকে, হ্যাঁ, বাঁদরের মতন বাঁদর যা ইচ্ছে তাই করতে থাকে, বাঁদর হয়ে যায় শাসন না থাকলে, যেরকম আমাদের ল অ্যান্ড অর্ডার সিস্টেম ব্রেকডাউন হয়ে গেছে, এইরকম অবস্থা. Anyway, let us go to the next slide. Limitations of artificial classification: oversimplifies, does not account for evolutionary history, can lead to incorrect groupings, bees and birds together because they fly, incorrect grouping, এটা limitations. Advantages of phylogenetic classification: provides a more accurate representation of evolutionary history based on objective data like DNA structure, DNA sequence use করে, especially 5s ribosomal DNA sequence টা use করা হয়, and it reflects true biological relationships. 1 নম্বর 2 নম্বরের আসতে পারে. And what is the future? Advances in molecular biology and genetics are refining phylogenetic classification. মানে basically I am also thinking of working on phylogenetic classification based on DNA sequence and bioinformatic comparison. You get a more accurate evolutionary history, more accurate classification, and there are new technologies are being discovered which are making the giving a more accurate evolutionary relationship. Just চোখে দেখে বা কেটে না, তুমি ডিএনএ সিকোয়েন্স কম্পেয়ার করে আর মেকিং, ঠিক আছে? কেস স্টাডি, ম্যামালিয়ান phylogeneটা দেখো. Recent genetic studies have revised the evolutionary history of mammals. Whales আর হিপো ওদেরকে অলমোস্ট একই জায়গায় নিয়ে রেখেছে, whales and hippo, তাদের কমন অ্যানসেস্টর, কে জলে থাকে আর একজন ডাঙায় থাকে. So recent ওদের ডিএনএ সিকোয়েন্স করে, after sequencing their DNA, you find that whales and hippos, you can classify them together. তফাৎ আছে, but you can classify them together. অনেক similarities আছে whales and hippos there. So they share a common ancestor, যেরকম 3 একদিকে কর্ডেট একদিকে ইকাইনোডার্ম, ওরকম, ঠিক আছে? So artificial classification is useful but limited. Natural classification provides a broader understanding. Phylogenetic classification offers the most accurate evolutionary insights. So questions, এই যে ইমেলটা দিয়ে দিয়েছি পরেরটাতে, ওইটাতে আমাকে কোয়েশ্চেন্স লিখবি যদি কোনো কিছু ইয়ে থাকে, আর you can write in my Google Classroom also, you can call me, WhatsApp me, feel free to, you can even talk to me here. Okay, ঠিক আছে.